George III is a memorable king in the history of England and the world. It was during his reign that the American War of Independence took place, and England lost that colony, resulting in the creation of the United States of America. Among many other things, he is also remembered for his madness, as he suffered from a disease that is now believed to have been porphyria. He married a German woman named Charlotte of Strelitz. The marriage between Charlotte and George III seems to have been very happy, and they had 15 children. Among these 15 children, 6 were girls. Surprisingly, none of them had the freedom to choose a husband, not even one suggested by their parents, which was common at the time. In fact, these girls were kept under strict lock and key. The jealousy and overprotectiveness that both the father and mother had for them were so extreme that they went completely beyond what was normal. Some of them married well after the age of 40, an advanced age for the time, while others never even had that opportunity. Unlike the Netflix series Bridgerton, which is currently very popular, where Charlotte constantly complains that her daughters are not marrying and are not giving her a grandchild to continue the dynasty, which was on the verge of extinction if not for the birth of little Victoria, who would reign over the United Kingdom and give her name to an era. In real life, Charlotte did not want her daughters to marry. This was due to her excessive love for them and her fear that upon marrying they would have to move far away to a distant kingdom, as they were daughters of kings and had to marry princes. Queen Charlotte did not want this separation. Her husband, King George III, and the father of the girls, was completely in agreement with his wife. Furthermore, he had another even stronger reason to prevent his daughters from courting or marrying princes from distant lands. That reason was his sister, Caroline Matilda, whom he gave in marriage to his cousin, the Danish King Christian VII, who was also insane and treated his wife in a less than affectionate way, to say the least. Far from home, Caroline Matilda was a princess who suffered terribly. Seeing what had happened to his sister, the king did everything in his power to ensure that the same fate would not befall his daughters. In today's video, you will learn about the life of Caroline Matilda, the sister of George III, and her painful story at the hands of her cousin and husband, Christian VII. She would eventually have an extramarital affair with his doctor, a decision for which she would pay a very high price. Princess Caroline Matilda was born on July 22, 1751, as the 9th and youngest daughter of Frederick Ludwig, Prince of Wales, and Augusta of Saxe-Gotha. She was the granddaughter of the British King George II and was born into the illustrious House of Hanover, which had succeeded the House of Stuart on the British throne in 1714. Tragically, her father passed away suddenly just 4 months before her birth, on March 31, 1751, making Caroline Matilda a posthumous child. Despite this, she was granted the title of Royal Highness, equivalent to that of a daughter of a Prince of Wales, although at the time of her birth, that title already belonged to her older brother, Prince George, the future King George III of Great Britain. Caroline Matilda was born at her parents' residence, Leicester House, a grand noble mansion in Westminster, north of what is now Leicester Square in London. Since 1737, the family had lived there in exile from the court due to her father's strained relationship with his own parents. She grew up among 9 siblings, under the care of her mother, the widowed Princess of Wales. After her father's untimely death, during the final years of George II's reign, Augusta chose to live in seclusion with her children, dedicating herself to their education and keeping them away from the English court and its corruptions. This decision by Augusta was heavily criticized, as it isolated her children from the outside world, raising them in a closed family environment where they rarely had contact with outsiders. On April 25, 1760, when Caroline Matilda was just 9 years old, her grandfather, King George II, passed away, and her older brother ascended to the British throne as George III at the age of 22. Caroline Matilda made only 2 significant public appearances. In 1761, at her brother's coronation, and in 1764, as a bridesmaid at the wedding of her older sister, Augusta, to Crown Prince Carl William. Caroline Matilda was described as temperamental but also natural and informal. She showed little inclination toward politics and the intrigues of the court. Despite the shortcomings in her education and that of her sisters, she was recognized for her intelligence. An avid reader, she was fluent in Italian, French, and German, in addition to English. She loved outdoor activities, especially horseback riding, and possessed notable musical talent, playing the harpsichord and having a beautiful, captivating singing voice. Meanwhile, at the Danish court, a bride was being sought for Crown Prince Christian. In 1764, a union between the prince and a British princess was proposed, a plan promoted by the influential Danish Prime Minister Bernstorff, who saw it as an opportunity to strengthen ties between Denmark, Norway, and Great Britain. Christian, the eldest son of King Frederick V, and his wife Louise of Great Britain, was a cousin to the children of the late Prince of Wales, making the choice of a British princess a strategic one. However, initially, the chosen bride was not Caroline Matilda, but her older sister, Princess Louise. Yet when the Danish envoy Hans Caspar visited England in 1765, he decided that Caroline Matilda would be the bride. The reasons for this change remain unknown, but it is said that it was because Caroline appeared more robust and healthy. Thus, at the age of 13, and without her consent, Caroline was betrothed to Crown Prince Christian, who was 2 years older than her. The official engagement was announced on January 10, 1765, establishing strong alliances between the two kingdoms. However, the wedding preparations were prolonged, as King George III, Caroline's brother, believed his sister was too young to marry and was already aware of his cousin's mental issues. For this reason, he tried to keep his sister in England for as long as possible. But a year after the engagement, King Frederick V of Denmark passed away, and his son, Prince Christian, ascended to the throne as Christian VII. After the proxy marriage was signed in October of that year, preparations began for the princess's journey to Danish lands. The wedding took place on November 8th in the chapel of Christiansborg Castle in Copenhagen. Caroline Matilda was only 15 years old at the time. The beginning of that marriage was very difficult. Christian was cold and distant, and he made it clear that he did not like his wife's appearance, even though Caroline was considered attractive by many. Still, her husband showed no attraction to her whatsoever. The new queen did not speak Danish and could barely communicate with the other members of the court, but she quickly dedicated herself to learning the language. The marriage, in addition to forming an alliance with England, was also motivated by the hope that, upon marrying, Christian would overcome his mental issues and abandon his scandalous romantic life. It was believed that Christian was attracted to both men and women, preferring male company, but he also organized encounters with courtesans, prostitutes, and participated in orgies without concern for hiding his behavior, which was a complete scandal. On the other hand, Caroline also felt no attraction to her husband and soon realized that he suffered from severe mental problems. The queen refused, from the beginning, to consummate the marriage, which became a major issue for producing an heir. The king was advised to consummate the marriage as soon as possible. One day, Christian attempted to share the bed with his wife, but Caroline Matilda, advised by her lady-in-waiting, Louise von Plessen, claimed to be ill, which provoked the monarch's fury. He even tried to force her to consummate the marriage. The situation reached a point that caused concern in the court. Then the queen was asked to give in a little, and the king was urged to moderate his intimate life and treat his wife better. Finally, they consummated the marriage, sharing the bed until the queen became pregnant. Over time, she continued to struggle to fully integrate into the court, which was very rigid. She was seen as a pleasant, temperamental, kind, and eager to learn young woman. She also enjoyed parties and celebrations, and considered too intense, became increasingly isolated and distant in the Danish court. She attracted the attention of many men, who were fascinated by her, but she also aroused the envy of many women in the court, becoming the target of numerous mockeries. On January 28, 1768, The queen gave birth to her first child, a boy named Frederick, the future Frederick VI of Denmark. With the arrival of the heir, the marriage began to decline, and Christian indulged in countless pleasures of life. The queen, for her part, felt extremely lonely in a foreign land, having only the company of her lady-in-waiting, Louise von Plessen. However, by order of the king's favorites, Louise was expelled from the court and later forced to leave Denmark. When the queen learned of what had happened and that her lady-in-waiting had left the kingdom, she lost her only friend in the palace, living almost completely ignored by the majority of the court members and also by her husband. In the summer of 1768, Christian embarked on a long journey abroad, visiting various European courts. The expedition was promoted by members of the government who hoped that new environments would bring changes to the king's behavior. During this trip, Christian met the physician Johann Friedrich Struensee, who quickly perceived the king's problems. The two formed a close friendship, and upon returning, Struensee began working as the royal physician. This physician helped alleviate the king's mental problems and even tried to convince the monarch to improve his relationship with his wife, encouraging him to get to know her better and to enjoy the marriage. Following the doctor's advice, Christian organized a grand birthday party for his wife. However, Caroline Matilda soon realized that it was Struensee who was behind it all, which sparked a growing fascination and curiosity in her for the physician. That same summer, the queen faced some health issues, and her husband managed to convince her to let the doctor examine her. Concerned about their son's fragile health, the monarchs entrusted the physician to examine the prince and vaccinate him against smallpox, a disease that was causing a major epidemic at the time. The queen then began to feel great admiration for Struensee, and over the months, an intense attraction developed between them. They likely tried to resist the passion and even avoided contact, but they eventually became lovers in the spring of 1770. It is believed that Christian noticed the attraction between his wife and his friend, finding the situation amusing. As the king's mental problems worsened, Struensee became the monarch's right-hand man and the true ruler of Denmark and Norway. Meanwhile, the queen gained more influence at court, something her lover took advantage of. Gradually, the couple's behavior became scandalous, and their affair was evident, with the physician accompanying the queen at all times. On July 7, 1771, the queen gave birth to her second and only daughter. The girl was named Louise Augusta. That birth caused a major scandal, as everyone was aware of the king's mental frailty. To make matters worse, the girl bore a strong resemblance to the physician. The identity of Louise Augusta's father was never clarified, although contemporaries and modern historians agree that Struensee was the father. Thus, Louise Augusta earned the unflattering nickname La Petite Struensee. Shortly after the birth, rumors emerged directly accusing the lovers of conspiring to imprison the king and rule with the queen as regent, sharing power with her lover. Although these rumors have been debunked by historians and there is no evidence that the lovers planned such a conspiracy, several members of the nobility and the government tried to separate the couple and even offered bribes for Struensee to leave the country. But he refused, always remaining by the queen's side. There was much envy, and many nobles could not accept that the queen and the physician were ruling under the king's figure. So they sought the help of Queen Dowager Juliana Maria of Brunswick, who was Christian's stepmother, and thus began secretly plotting the capture of the lovers. On the night of January 16th to 17th, 1772, a grand masked ball was held at the palace. The lovers thoroughly enjoyed the celebration, but in the early hours of the morning after the ball, several men stormed into their chambers and arrested the couple. Caroline tried to take her daughter with her into exile, claiming that Louise Augusta had no ties to the Danish royal family. Desperate, she fought to keep at least one of her children. She was taken to Kronborg Palace and was allowed to bring her daughter, Louise Augusta, with her, while Frederick remained behind. During the journey to the palace, mother and daughter were treated terribly. Once at the palace, Caroline was pressured to confess her relationship with the physician and had only the company of a lady-in-waiting who deeply hated her and treated her in a humiliating manner, making her life unbearable. The monarch was not allowed to receive visitors, having only the company of her young daughter and the lady-in-waiting who despised her. On February 20th, 1772, Struensee's interrogation began. For days, he said absolutely nothing. However, in the end, he placed all the blame on the Queen. Perhaps he was forced to accuse his lover, or even tortured. These words from the physician reached Caroline Matilda's ears, and she also admitted to being the sole culprit. It is believed that the Queen was psychologically manipulated and pressured by her interrogators. After a series of trials, it was finally declared that the Queen was innocent and had admitted guilt under pressure, while Struensee was found guilty and sentenced to death, along with his friend Enevold Brandt, who was accused of being an accomplice. Both were executed on April 28, 1772. That same month, the marriage between Caroline Matilda and Christian VII was dissolved, and she lost her title as queen. The new rulers of the country planned to keep her in custody for life, but they faced strong pressure from the British royal family and government. Her brother, King George III of England, sent warships to Denmark. Seeing the British frigates anchored from her room in Kronborg Palace, Caroline Matilda had to say goodbye to Louise Augusta, her daughter, who was taken away by force. She boarded a ship to Chell in Hanover, a territory belonging to her brother, George III, where she never saw her children again. Caroline Matilda's exile in Chell was a time of serenity, marked by her reunion with her longtime friend, Louise von Plessen. The two began living together in Chell Castle, where they rekindled their friendship. The former queen, plunged into deep melancholy, wished to forget Denmark entirely. However, her heart remained restless, with constant concern for her children, from whom she had been cruelly separated. Perhaps she held some hope of seeing her beloved children again, but unexpectedly, Caroline Matilda died of typhoid fever in 1775, at just 23 years old. The city organized a large fundraising effort to erect a monument in her memory, and her remains rest in the crypt of St. Mary's Church in Celle, Hanover.